Hey guys, good morning. This is Jason Flame, host of our Moorpark Chamber of Commerce Chamber Chat. Super excited to introduce another one of our amazing community members and business owner. This is German Chatsky, and let me just read a little bit about him, and then we'll get to diving in a little bit deeper. So, from escaping the Soviet Union as a young child to becoming a top structural engineer and entrepreneur, German Chatsky's story is one of perseverance, grit, and determination. After overcoming the loss of both parents by the age of 11, German excelled academically, earning both his bachelor's and master's degrees in civil engineering from CSUN while graduating at the top of his class. As the founder of German Engineering, Design, and Consulting Services, he has helped design over 120 affordable housing projects across Los Angeles County and built innovative engineering software still used in his business today. So get excited as we discuss his resilience, leadership, entrepreneurship, community involvement, and what it takes to reinvent yourself when life throws unexpected challenges your way. So this is German Chatsky. Good morning.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Hi, Jason.
Good to have you on. I love the Kobe Bryant in the background.
He's my hero.
Love it. Love it. Very cool. So hey, tell me a little bit more about kind of what's going on in your life. Tell us a little bit more that I wasn't able to give you in that opening intro, and just kind of get us started.
Yeah, ever since I moved out to Moorpark 5 years ago, it's been more than 5 years now, but, having a family, having a wife, having daughters, having that responsibility of providing for them, and also realizing that, Moorpark's an amazing community. And I've always been told that if you want to make a difference, you got to do it at the local level. So that's one of the reasons why I do so much around the community. And I don't want to say that I do all that much, but I'm just trying to do the best I can, the most I can, not just to make sure the community thrives, but also to be a role model for my daughters.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really cool. I know having a daughter, what that life is like.
Yeah,
And of course, you want to be the man that you want her to marry. And like you said, set a
absolutely.
really good, strong example for her. I know we got a lot of questions today, but I want to remind anybody who is watching this live. If you have any questions and you want to drop those questions in the comments, please let us know. And I'm sure German could chat it up with
Perfect.
us and answer those questions. But yeah, and also please go to Moorpark Chamber of Commerce on YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's a fairly new channel, but we have a bunch of other local business owners and community members that we've interviewed on that channel. And you can like, share, and comment anywhere else on social media. So let's dive in, German, and hit this first question. Your life story begins with escaping the Soviet Union and immigrating to the United States and overcoming the loss of both parents by age 11. Looking back, what lessons from those early challenges have had the biggest impact on the person and leader you are today?
Yeah, that's a deep question. I think for a lot of people, it's a very daunting thing to even have to think about. I think in some ways I was a little bit fortunate where I was so young that it didn't really hit me until a little bit later. So growing up, yes, my family escaped religious persecution. We got out of the USSR, eventually immigrated to New York, and then found ourselves in Los Angeles because that's where we had a good, work opportunity for my mom. But my parents, being immigrants who just moved into the country, didn't have two nickels to rub together. They were just busy working, 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 working. Your typical immigrant family that is just trying to survive. So I had little to no supervision, which allowed me to do a lot of the things that I wanted, play sports, play video games, go to friends' houses. Nobody was there to watch me. And but at the same time, it allowed me to become very responsible at a young age. And when I ended up losing my parents, it didn't hit me because even before I had lost them, I was already on my own for most of the day. I got myself to school, I got to myself from school, I made sure my homework was done, took out the trash, vacuumed, I even did, fed myself a lot. So it was, it wasn't that, they were there or weren't there, but it was just so, I was so used to being on my own. It was after it all had happened that, again, I don't feel like it hit me. A child, you're always thinking like, well, maybe they just went on vacation, maybe they're going to be back at some point, maybe I'll see them at some point, this is not forever. The more I told my friends, my new friends, because when my mom had passed, my dad figured, look, I can't do this. I got two boys. One of them is 21, the other one is 11. I can't handle this. I'm trying to survive on my own anyway. And being a single parent in that point is just impossible. So he went to go, sent me to New York to live with my aunt and uncle and two cousins while he tried to kind of wrap up the situation and then move out there. But unfortunately, he passed away before he could. And that hit me harder because, again, now I'm like, well, now I'm all on my own. I
Mm-hmm.
don't have, yes, I have my aunt and uncle and cousins, but you always feel like a little bit of an outsider in those moments, and you do start to focus on, how you're treated differently from your cousins. And I always felt like my aunt pushed me a lot harder than she did them. She
Mm.
let them slide with a lot of things that I didn't get away with, and kind of pushed me to feel like I'm all on my own. And
Yeah.
then when I talk to my friends that are my age and they just can't even comprehend, and then they start, almost like pointing out all the things that happened to me that, should be really bad. And not to say that it wasn't, but now all of a sudden it brought, put all the ideas in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And definitely some dark times followed. I lost my grandfather probably less than a year after I lost my dad. And
Mm.
that's when I pretty much had a mental breakdown where I'm like, look, my families are dropping like flies. My parents died in their 40s. And it just kind of was like a lot of times was like, what's the point? Why, why bother when life is unfair? And, I had those moments, a lot of self-pity. And you would think that if you're gonna go and cry in the dark, that it's gonna help. It does not. I mean, it's like just throws gasoline on the fire. And it wasn't until I was like maybe 16 that I told myself that I'm gonna do something different. I'm gonna focus on the positives. I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
focus on being productive, and I'm gonna try to make as much as I can out of what I got.
So,
I fa-
I was going to say, so in a couple words, some things that, early challenges have had the biggest impact on you as a person. Number one, it sounds like independence. It
yeah.
sounds like responsibility. I'm feeling like, you had a lot of pressure. So now how did that make you the leader that you are, and the person that you are now in your career?
So again, living in New York with with my aunt and uncle and cousins, golf saved my life, I think. So when I was 12 years old, we went out to this beach, Jones Beach in Long Island, played this little chip and putt, and I kind of fell in love with the game. I played terrible, and when I got into high school, I really wanted to join the golf team.
Hmm.
It was not a popular sport. Nobody wanted to do it. So I tried out for the team thinking, well, at the very least, I just get to play golf. And this old Italian coach took me aside and he was like, boy, you are terrible. You're going to embarrass me. You're going to embarrass your schoolmates. You're going to embarrass yourself. You're not ready. And I went down on the other side of the driving range and sulked in my sorrows, as I did as a kid often. And I noticed there was a guy teaching. So somebody was taking a lesson and the guy was teaching him. And I sat there quietly and watched the lesson, thinking, well, what can I learn? Maybe I can just improve in the next 30 minutes just by watching.
Mm-hmm.
When the lesson was over, I went over to him and I said, wow, like, this is awesome. And, how could I get better at golf? I think I was like 12 at the
Yeah.
time. And he looked at me, he was like, how old are you? I'm like, 12. He goes, you can't like You can't work in this country. It's illegal. And I said, how about this? How about I will work for free. I'll go pick up the golf balls. I'll clean this place up. And all you need to do is just let me practice for free and you give me lessons when you have the time. And he agreed. And I spent the next 12 months like nothing else mattered. I mean, that's why I say Kobe's my hero because I took that same approach. I'm going to outwork everybody. I'm going to hit 5,000 balls a day. I'm going to practice until my hands are bleeding. And 12 months later, I went back to tryouts and I made the team. And it was probably maybe 4 weeks in that the coach put me in the number one spot. Now I had to play against the best players in Long Island. And I think I was 53-3 for, the 3 years that I was on the team, you
Wow.
know, and it really showed me how, what I'm capable of it if I really try. I think kids, and I see it in my kids, and I see it in other people's kids all the time. They don't try, they don't care, and they're just kind of like living in this whole fear of failure. And that's what just clicked in my mind at a certain age that if I really put my heart into it, then, then I could succeed. But every time I found myself that I didn't succeed is because I didn't give it my all. So, doing that in golf, I went to college and I was still kind of lost at the time. I wasn't really doing well in school. And eventually I met somebody who was studying civil engineering. And I can't say I was a huge fan of the guy, but I was like, you know what? I want to give this a try. So when I started the civil engineering program at CSUN, I told myself, I was like, I'm going to give it my all. And I am not going to stop until I absolutely destroy this university. I'm going to really show everybody what I got. And when I took that mentality that I learned to play golf in, and I applied it to my education, all of a sudden I'm getting straight A's, because I studied all the time. And one of the things that really benefited me at that time was I met a few guys that were serious about their education as well, and they struggled a lot to learn the math. And we would study at least like 8 hours a day, and usually 7 days a week we were
Wow.
studying. And I found that if I taught them everything, that really reinforced what I knew. So that's how I got into the whole tutoring, aspect. And I found myself really just, if I failed, I got an A minus. For me, that was a fail. And I just kept it going, and I just never let up. And I found myself like by junior year, I was explaining stuff to my professors because they were always reliant on solution manuals and the answers to work their way backwards through the solutions. And they couldn't explain why these approaches were used. And I would go home and I'd figure out exactly how those approaches came about. And I would go and I would explain it to them in private. And I'd find like a month later, they're teaching it to the class.
Yeah. So it sounds like, the work ethic you have has kind of stemmed from, being fairly alone in your younger years and being forced to be independent, to be resourceful, to just, go until, there was no quit in you. You were going to go until
Yeah,
you got it, right? And
absolutely.
so this is kind of like brought you into your career, and now that same work ethic is what follows you the rest of your life, right? And
Yeah.
you earned both your bachelor's and your master's, while serving in leadership roles and maintaining that outstanding academic success. What daily habits or what regular habits? I know we've talked a lot about mindset. You talked about a couple of mentors, but what are some of the other habits that help you achieve success and, excellence despite the obstacles you faced growing up?
It just stems, as a guy, to me, it was the athletes. Who were your role models when you were a teenager? Almost always it's an athlete. And athletes that come to mind would be, Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Tiger Woods, and what I remember even as like a teenager was watching a VHS tape of Michael Jordan and how he hit the gym before anybody else. And he was the last one to leave the gym. And same thing with Kobe. Kobe knew that he could outwork everybody. And that's the mentality that I really adopted and believed. And I knew that at the end of the day, when you walk in the bathroom and you look in the mirror, you're the person that you have to respect. And a lot of us, I think, can fall prey to just fooling ourselves into saying that, hey, we're kicking butt, we're doing everything we can, I'm the man, I got this. But it wasn't until I really became so strict with myself and setting such high standards for myself that I was almost the one that held myself accountable. And I knew that, okay, if I'm going to start studying before everybody else and I'm going to be the last one to stop studying, then I'm going to outdo everybody. While they're watching TV, I'm studying. I'm going to learn every single subject, inside and out. I'm going to digest every topic. And I think that's what really, separated me from everybody else was just my willingness to work harder than everybody else.
Yeah. So walk us through, you talked about some of the courses and the classes that you took in your education. Walk us through those early stages of, starting your own business, or what led to you starting your own business.
So, I mean, I graduated at an unfortunate time. The economy was really bad. I sent out at least 1,000 applications for work. And I'll never forget when one of my buddies was like, "Oh, I went on a job interview with LADWP, and guess who was in that room getting interviewed? Our professor."
Hmm.
And that's when it was like, where I'm trying to keep the language clean, but we're in a tough spot. If we're competing against our professors for these jobs, we're never going to get them. And I got fortunate enough to get hired in a manufacturing company that wasn't far from where I lived. And it wasn't engineering work per se, but it was architectural and construction work. So I was the guy that had to read the blueprints, figure out the scope of work, do all these quantity takeoffs, figure out how much materials we need for this component, that component. I had to price them out, figure out how we're going to make these molds to cast these products, how we're going to install them. And it really gave me a leg up on the construction side because spending 6 years in school learning engineering, you can design something, but most of us don't think about how it's built.
Hmm.
And, a lot of engineers will design things that just can't get built because they haven't thought about how this all comes together. And that really gave me the benefit. And I knew a guy that I went to school with, and he was in the engineering world. He was working for a licensed engineer, doing the grunt work, and he brought me in and said, "Hey, maybe you want to do some work on the side." And I totally agreed because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in the engineering world. Um, so I did that for at least 5 years while working at the manufacturing company. I also started tutoring just to make some extra money. And I found myself like really having to teach those subjects that I learned in school over and over and over again. So, I mean, I'll never forget this stuff. I could still crack open a book and derive a formula from, 15, 20 years ago because I had taught it so many times.
Mhm.
And eventually, I did enough work for friends that I said, "Hey guys, would you sign these referral letters for me so I can take the exam?" And they were like, "Yeah, I've been waiting for you to say that. What took you so long?" So took the exam, passed it with flying colors, and went back to the guy that brought me the work. And I said, "Hey, look, we've been working for this clown for like 4 or 5 years, and every single project seems to go sideways. And it's always down to a lack of communication and just taking forever to get anything done." And he agreed with me. He was tired of it because he was the one that was getting the phone calls with the complaints. So we decided to, hey, we're just going to do this, you and me. We're going to
Mhm.
do it differently. We're going to answer the phone. We're going to get projects knocked out. We're going to do it. And it was a slow start, but thankfully during the time, I had the job at the manufacturing company. I was still tutoring, so I didn't need the money to to get by. So it was just all a learning experience until really it took over everything else. Our
Hmm.
business grew exponentially, and every year we were doing better and better and better. And as I'm, going through it, I'm learning and I'm getting better and better and better. And what always kind of was like, I guess you could call it a crutch, because I taught everybody that I went to school with. When I called them in the professional setting and said, "Hey, man, I'm looking at a project right now, and there's this component, and I just can't wrap my head around the more practical side of what should I design here, and how do I need to look at the situation to really analyze it properly?" They were more than happy to help, and it was great that I always had somebody I could call if I had a
Hmm.
question. And yeah, eventually, the business grew, and my partner was the one who was bringing in the work. I just had to do it.
Hmm.
So it was easy. It was easy for me to sit in front of a computer and do math and just, to me at the time, I mean, I didn't have kids yet. So if I had to stay up till 4 in the morning and work, it was easy. It was just like, this isn't work. I don't dread this. It's kind of almost felt like video games. you
Well,
know
so tell me a little bit more about your firm played a significant role in designing affordable housing projects throughout Los Angeles County. What are
yeah.
what are some of the biggest misconceptions people have about affordable housing, and why is it such an important issue for our communities?
I mean, look, first and foremost, you think about people who are struggling, and we hear all these stories about people who end up on the streets end up getting caught up in drugs. Which is easy because look, you're in a tough situation. There's really not much to look forward to. You're suffering every day. And unfortunately, that's just one way to get your mind off of your problems. And then you're just, you're digging a deeper hole. So, what affordable housing does for people, it gives them, a little bit of a support system to get back on their feet. And if you can just have that little apartment, we're talking about 500, 600 square foot, one bedroom apartments. um it really does, give you what the basic needs you need to actually try to get out of the situation you're in. So if you take a struggling family and you give them a place to stay, they're going to be able to focus on getting the job, and getting back on their feet.
Hmm.
If you let them dwindle into the system and they end up on the streets living in a tent on a sidewalk, it's going to be a lot more of a burden on the system to get them out. And look, some people assume just, what kind of person is living in these affordable housing homes. And the truth is that every walk of life, from senior citizens to people who just can't afford to live because hey, we're living on minimum wage, and that's just not enough to survive, especially if you got kids, a wife, an entire family. Sometimes generations of families live together just because that's the only way they can survive. And really, that's what it comes down to, is that if you can provide this housing, you're just giving people that temporary support to get back on their feet. And really, every time you get somebody back on their feet, that's just another person contributing to society, which is what how we really survive.
Hmm. How
If we
did
don't
you
have tax money, I'm sorry, if we don't have tax money, how are we going to keep the business, the government running?
right? How did you get involved in designing the affordable housing projects?
Um, Again, my partner is just one of those that he's a social butterfly. He really ran into a lot of different people. And, at the time, I guess some of these developers really knew how to benefit um, from developing these buildings, whether it's a tax incentive or other incentives. I didn't get involved in that, so I can't really speak about the details. But they wanted to do it, we were there doing it for them, and it was a learning curve. There was a lot of red tape to get these buildings, before you even get a shovel in the ground. And with every project we became more and more familiar with all the red tape that was involved. And we started cutting through that red tape quicker and quicker and quicker. And eventually, our reputations grew as the people who know the most about the red tape. And then people all of a sudden started coming to us, and the ones that were finishing the buildings were coming right back with another one. And it was just a huge snowball. I think December 2022, I probably designed 20 buildings in 30 days. I
Wow.
barely slept, but I got it all done. And the reason why I did it is because every year the code changes. And there was a lot of concern that some of these programs that allow it to become more affordable for the developer were going to go away. So we had to get the applications in the system before the end of the year. And and I knocked it out. Another challenge that I was not going to shy away from.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about your community involvement here in Moorpark now.
Sure.
Recently, I know in this we just announced it at the last Moorpark Chamber of Commerce breakfast that you are one of the newest members to the library board.
Yeah, I was probably the most shocked person in the room. Um, I realized that when everybody came and presented how well qualified they are, experienced they were, familiar with that kind of educational side of it. And here I'm thinking, I'm like, man, I'm an engineer, I'm a mathematician, I'm out of my, like kind of realm here. And everybody's so well prepared. I almost walked out of that room before I had a chance to speak, you know.
What made you apply?
I've been tutoring at the library for almost a year. And during that time, I really got to know all the people who work in the library, and just great people. And, my daughters always attended their like little free events. And I always thought that was the best thing. It's like, hey, look, we can go do arts and crafts for free. This is fantastic. And they were the ones to encourage me to apply because, I heard all their, pros and cons about the current system. And I said, yeah, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to give it a try. If they don't like me, they don't like me. Life goes on. But when they selected me, my jaw was on the ground. I was like, what? How did how did I what? And I just like I'm still kind of in shock. But again, now it's time to do the real work.
Right.
Now I got to really understand what are our responsibilities, what are the opportunities. And through some of the people I met with the Moorpark Friends of the Library, and I've spoken with them at length, all the ideas and things that they want to do with the new library. And I think it's absolutely amazing, because growing up in West Hollywood, I walked into that library on Gardner and it was not pretty, and then I walked into the Beverly Hills Public Library and it might as well have been Hogwarts. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, and you just see the difference between the two,
Yeah.
and I want our community to be the Beverly Hills Public Library, the one that doesn't just offer books, the one that, and again, I mean, I don't know if you know some of the ideas that these Moorpark Friends of the Library have, but it's just like phenomenal. We're talking about podcast studios, CNC machines, 3D printers, a whole area for entrepreneurs. And I'm just like, first of all, this is the best thing for kids because you need this type of stuff. I also got accepted to a gifted school when I started fifth grade. And again, I went from a really bad public system to a absolutely phenomenal public system. And it really shows you that, like, if you're given, if you give children that opportunity to see how far they can, how much they can accomplish,
Hmm.
that's maximizing the chances that they're going to be, successful, and not just strive for the bare minimum, because that's what happens in a poor community. In a poor community, you're just like, as long as I got my rent covered, as long as I got fed, everything's fine. But when you realize that there's opportunities for real success, that's when you're like, hey, maybe I have a chance. And I want to give everybody in Moorpark that chance. So I'm ready to put in that work and really learn about what can we do with the library board and what kind of impact we can make. And again, I don't shy away from hard work, that sweat ethic that everybody, talks about.
Hmm. And you're very involved in other aspects of the community, as far as obviously being involved now in the Moorpark Chamber of Commerce, Rotary Club. You help out with the PTA. What excites you most about the future of Moorpark? And you've talked about some of the ways that you hope to make a lasting impact on the community, but what are also some of those benefits for you as a business owner to be involved in some of these
Um,
opportunities?
yeah, I mean, look, obviously, again, I really believe that kids need that opportunity. And I do believe that, a lot of us complain about the system, especially growing up. We're like, oh, the man's going to keep us down. But what I learned, one of the most kind of important political things that I heard was that, look, if you got issues and you want to make a difference, it starts at the local level. You can't be sending letters to the White House about, the quality of the parks in your neighborhood, or the quality of education the kids are getting in the district. So that's why I firmly believe about being active, is because, again, I want those kids to have that opportunity to really, reach for the stars. And I don't want anything to be able to hold them back from reaching their true potential, because ultimately that's how this community is going to benefit, whether it's kids from within the community, or families from outside of the community that are going to look at Moorpark and say, wow, this is a really cool place, and this is really a great place where I feel like I want to raise my family. And they're going to come in here and they're going to make it even better, because again, they're bringing in, that ability to even, what am I trying to say, to give back to the community even more in different ways. I mean,
Hmm.
I've met a lot of these families that really donate a lot, to this community, and that's what really makes the difference. That when I joined the PTA, it was shocking how much the PTA is doing to benefit the school. Without the PTA, the school would be below average, if in my honest opinion. But it's because of the PTA, is it that's why the school thrives and the kids in the school thrive. Now, PTA is not, selling, some kind of product and bringing in business and then using the profits to benefit the kids. No, it's the families that are supporting the PTA that are making the difference. And, bringing in more of those families is how it's going to get even better. As a business owner, again, look, I came into Moorpark 5 years ago. I didn't know a single person who lived in Moorpark when I moved here, but I quickly realized how amazing the people are here. I've lived in some bad neighborhoods, and you don't even want to talk to your neighbors in those areas. But here, I'm like, look, if you want to borrow my lawnmower. I got no problem. You need help hanging that picture up in your living room, I'll be there. No problem. You just let me know how I can help. If I can physically do it, I will do it. And, as a business owner, I feel like it's important to show the community who you are as an individual, to earn trust. I feel like it's important to have trust in the people you hire, especially if you're hiring someone to design your home. It baffles me how many people are like, well, yeah, I found somebody in Asia to do my engineering for me. Like, Are you okay? Are you sure this is a good idea? Because God forbid something goes wrong, you only have yourself to blame. But here I am, I've mentioned this to a lot of people, like, I live right down the street from you. If there's ever a problem, where I live, how to get a hold of me. And that's how I select, the people that I do business with, is like, I want to know where you live, and I
Hmm.
want to know what kind of car you drive, because I want to make sure that if I got a problem, I can find you to fix that problem, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't that, that to me, that makes the most sense.
Well, I think that's kind of been the theme of our discussion today is learning about the kind of person that you are, German, and learning who you are. And I hope that this video serves as a really big benefit to you to let people know what kind of person you are. And I want to give you just a minute to talk a little bit more about your business and the
Mhm.
services that you offer, just so people, I mean, because we've been talking about your life and your background and
Mhm.
your mindset, but just really quickly, and
Yeah.
we only have a couple minutes left. Tell them all about the services that you offer. What kinds of things can they look for, or what kinds of things can they ask you to do for them?
Well, look, if I haven't explained it in a million ways, not during this interview, but pretty much every opportunity I get at every chamber breakfast, I design structures. Those include buildings, retaining walls, swimming pools, gazebos, anything that goes up that's not supposed to come down. That's what I deal with. But I also have a solid background in construction due to all my experience, not only in the manufacturing company, but through doing thousands of inspections for the buildings I've designed. So explain, you know, I thought to myself, look, if you're going to hire an engineer, just like if you were to hire a mechanic, how can you distinguish a good mechanic from a bad mechanic? We can't. If you fix it and it's fixed, you just assume that it was good. But there's a lot of things that none of us really see that go into it. And I realized that, first of all, I do beat to my own drum. I set a higher standard for my designs than most. I'm very thorough, very analytical, and I really look at the big picture. So that separates me from other engineers, but no one ever is going to see that.
Hmm.
So I had to figure out, well, what do people want? People want communication. People want someone who's going to answer that phone, answer that email. And even if it's a question that's not related to what I did for you, I'm there to answer that question. Why did the inspector, point this out? And I explain it. Or I explain the whole permitting process, what to expect. How do you hire a contractor? How do you hold that contractor accountable? I do have a contractor's license, but I haven't even given one thought to actually doing construction. But I just wanted to show that, hey, I know how this is done. I know how the legal side of construction works. I know how the construction process works. And I'm there to help you every step of the way. So while your house is getting built, I'm going to tell you what to expect. And I'm going to tell you all the ways your contractor is going to complain to you and how to kind of push back and hold your ground, that, hey, don't let this contractor take advantage of you. They can't come back and say, hey, this is $50,000 more than I thought. No, 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 sir. We signed a contract. It was your responsibility to read through the blueprints. It is your responsibility to follow through the blueprints. Yes, changes to the blueprints, you can ask for additional money, but all that has to be negotiated up front. When I was remodeling my house, I hired a painter and an electrician. Those two guys came in, combined bids, $26,000. We finished the project, those two guys, $65,000. And to be honest with you, I didn't argue with them. I let them walk all over me. I wanted to get that house done, and I wanted it done right. And I knew that arguments were going to, jeopardize that. So I kept my mouth shut. So that's what I do for people now. I design really quality engineering work that you're not going to find elsewhere. You're not going to find it in commercial software. You don't want somebody who knows how to use a piece of software designing your house. You want someone that understands how every component in a building works and why it's there, and make sure that it's utilized in your design. And that's what I do. I wrote my own software for that reason.
Where can people find you? We got to wrap up here in just a minute, German.
Sure.
Where can people find you? How do they connect with you? How do they contact you? Just to get started.
So, look, I got a website, www.structural-pe.com. The best way to contact me is on my email, because that's something that doesn't go away. I have a social media. I could do more with it, but the best way to reach me is through my email, chatsky@structural-pe.com, to get the ball rolling. Usually what I'll do is I'll schedule a phone call. I'll talk to you for like an hour, 2 hours, however long it takes to answer every question you got. Then the next step is a site visit. Come out to your property. Again, we go through the whole process. I do charge for that. Usually I do about $500 for the site visit, but I credit it back to you when you hire me for the engineering. So it's a win-win situation. You're concerned about your foundation. I come out to your house. I look at your foundation. If I give you good news, you gave me $500, we go our separate ways. If I don't have good news for you, guess what? That $500 is credited towards the work anyway. So you didn't really lose out on anything. And then we together come up with a plan, because look, it's more than just structural engineering to get you there. So I tell you what you need from an architect, what you need from a surveyor, what you need from your soils engineer, what to expect from the city, and all these things. So the best way to really get the ball rolling is to just send me an email, tell me a little bit about what you need and how I can help you, and then we'll schedule a phone call, and I will really clear up all the concerns that and unknowns that you're going to have before we even talk about money. And again, if you don't like what you heard, you got a lot of information out of it, cost you nothing. But if you did like what you hear, then I'll come to your house and we'll get started.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for taking the time to talk a little bit more about yourself and about your
No, I
company, your
appreciate you
business,
guys.
and your story. So I thank everybody for watching here today. Please share this video to someone who may be looking for an engineer or just want to hear a little bit more about some of the members at our Moorpark Chamber of Commerce and what
Yeah.
they do in our community. So, German, thank you for your time. I'll look forward to seeing you. We'll grab a
Thank you,
lunch soon,
Jason.
and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you. Appreciate it. You as well.
All
Take
right,
care.
guys, go out and
Thank you
make it
for
a
the
great week.
opportunity.
You are welcome, and we will see you at our Coffee with a Cop event coming up at the Country Harvest here in Moorpark. Please go to our Facebook page for Moorpark Chamber of Commerce. You can see a list of all of our upcoming events, including our networking breakfast, our networking mixers, all the ribbon cuttings, all the different events that we do for our local businesses here. So shop Moorpark, shop local, and we will see you very soon. Take care. Thanks, German.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.